Post 322. Study Session 14. East and Southern African Sources. Nyerere and Kaunda. Introduction. The two writers that we shall focus on in this lecture have written on some of the most vital issues in recent African political thought and practice. Such issues center on the preferred goal of African countries and peoples. These and other issues are outlined in this lecture as we look at the works of Julius Nyerere, former Tanzanian president, and Kenneth Kaunda, the Zambian president. Learning outcomes. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to describe the contributions of Nyerere and Kaunda to African political thought in this century, and highlight the perspectives of the two writers on political issues and events of the day. Julius Nyerere. In looking at the contributions of Nyerere, we shall focus on two main areas, namely, his own brand of African socialism, embodied in his Ujamaa philosophy, and his views on freedom in contemporary African society. African socialism and Ujamaa philosophy. Nyerere approaches his discussion of socialism from his own understanding of traditional, essentially pre-colonial Africa as recorded in the Tanzania experience. Beginning with the positive, he knows that traditional African community, or Ujamaa, was based on unity and three assumptions, namely, mutual respect or respect based on love, sharing of joint production, that all basic goods be held in common and shared among all members of the social unit. Thus, whatever inequalities existed were tempered by family and other social responsibilities, ensuring that such inequalities could never become gross and offensive to the social equality that was the basis of communal life. And lastly, work by all, that every member of the community had an obligation to work. Having outlined the positive side, he then goes on to criticize traditional life in Tanzania, explaining why such a social system prevented traditional society from fully developing its potentials. The explanation for him lies in two basic factors, namely, the tendency for traditional societies to accept and tolerate at least one form of inequality, such as that based on sex. According to him, the women in traditional society were regarded as having a place in the community, which was not only different, but was also to some extent inferior. And secondly, the grinding reality of abject poverty. As he puts it, the other aspect of traditional life which we have to break away from is its poverty. Certainly, there was an attractive degree of economic equality, but it was equality at a low level. The equality is good, but the level can be raised. But there was nothing inherent in the traditional system which causes poverty. It was the result of two things only. The first was ignorance, and the second was the scale of oppression. Both of these can be corrected without affecting the validity and applicability of the three principles of mutual respect, sharing of joint production, and work by all. These principles were and are the foundation of human society, of real practical human equality, and of peace between members of a society. They can also be a basis of economic development of modern knowledge and modern techniques of production are used. For Nyerere, therefore, the objectives of African socialism must include the following. 1. The building of a society in which all members would have equal rights and equal opportunities. 2. Launching of a war against poverty. And lastly, nurturing of mutual respect, unity, joint production, and work by all for all. As he puts it, the strategy of African socialists must be to improve on the tenets of African traditional society in order to adapt it to the technological needs of the present century. Moreover, such socialism must be based on land and agricultural production in the rural areas, hard work, and an efficient and democratic system of local government, as he warned. We shall be unable to fulfill these objectives if we continue to produce as individuals for individuals' profit. Certainly, a man who is working for himself and for his own profit will not suffer from exploitation in this employment, but neither will he make much progress. It is not long before an individual working alone reaches the limit of his powers. Only by working together can men overcome that limitation. The principles upon which the traditional extended family was based must be reactivated. Also, modern knowledge must be applied by these communities and to them. Notion of freedom in contemporary African society. In these perspectives on freedom, Inyere brings out the mutual dimensional nature of the concept. First, he identifies different levels at which the issue of freedom can be raised, and they include 1. Freedom at national level, which focuses on the ability of citizens of a given country to be able to make decisions on governance not dictated to them by citizens of other countries. 2. Freedom from hunger, disease, and poverty. And lastly, personal freedom, including freedom of speech, freedom from arbitrary arrest, and freedom to take part in political decision making. Secondly, he emphasizes the social and economic foundations of freedom. According to him, to the extent that our country remains poor and its people illiterate and without understanding or strength, then our national freedom can be endangered by any foreign power which is better equipped. In other words, freedom from hunger, sickness, and poverty depends upon an increase in the wealth and the knowledge available in the community, for a group of people can only consume and use the wealth they have already produced. For him, therefore, development enhances freedom, while freedom cannot ensue from the use of force or deceit. Kenneth Kaunda. In his book, Humanism, A Guide to the Nation, Kaunda, a former president of Zambia, sets forward a doctrine of humanism which argues for a man-centered society. He begins by noting that one consequence of colonialism has been to turn Africans into individualists. He describes traditional African society as a progressive and humanistic one, in which mutual aid was the norm and people worked cooperatively and collectively, without losing the identity of the individual for whose benefit and in whose name all was done. He then notes that Western colonial regimes were aggressively shattering in their individualistic, competitive, and possessive approach on the African continent. For Kaunda, therefore, the challenges of the post-colonial period revolved around questions such as who should own the means of creating wealth? Is it the state, the individual, or both? If both, in what proportion? How is wealth distributed? And how fair is this distribution? For him, the creation of gross inequalities in Africa tends to undermine the humanistic bent of traditional African society. The challenge for the present generation, therefore, is to preserve this heritage while engaging in political, economic, social, and cultural activities. In this regard, a knotty problem is how to preserve what is desirable from the past, even as African society emerges fully from non-money to a money-centered status. He then concludes that whatever changes takes place in our society, we must remember that it is people above ideology, man above institution. Society is there because of man. In other words, whatever we undertake to do, we have to remember that it is man that is the center of all human activity. According to him, the high valuation of man and respect for human dignity, which is a legacy of our tradition, should not be lost in the new Africa. African society has always been man-centered. Indeed, this is as it should be, otherwise, why is a house built? Why make a chair at all? Why build a factory? Why do you want a state ranch? For what else would there be need to grow food? Why is the fishing industry there? For Kaunda, the principle of humanism remains at the core of the preferred political doctrine of African democratic socialism. For him, just as for Nyerere, the crucial point is how to preserve what is good in the African past while utilizing the science and technology of the capitalist West, communist East, for the benefit of the continent. On these, he cautions against dogmatism, but rather endorses a search for material advancement that will manage to preserve the principles of traditional man-centered African society. Study session summary. In their writings, Nyerere and Kaunda emphasize the central role of man and the community in traditional African society. They therefore call for a political, social, economic and technological arrangement in modern-day Africa that will continue to lay emphasis on the improvement of man in harmony with his community, even as the project of development is pursued relentlessly. Of study session 14. Thank you for listening.